Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Seth Meyers, clinical psychologist, and today I'm going to be talking about the traits of the psychopath. A lot of times people talk about the psychopath and they talk about them in ways that really reinforce a lot of myths and things that aren't true. So, one of the things I'm going to try to do is try to clear up some of those myths and talk about psychopath traits in a way that is also based in research and experience in the testing for psychopaths that I'll talk about that I have had a little bit later. So, to begin, a psychopath is an individual that has psychopathy. And I'm going to share what the definition of psychopathy is. Believed Psychopathy is believed to be the most dangerous of the personality disorders. When we talk about psychopathy, we are talking about a cluster, a grouping of social, emotional, and lifestyle traits and behaviors, as well as antisocial traits and behaviors. From a clinical perspective, I can share as a clinical psychologist that when one talks about psychopath traits, how this would be reflected, for example, in a clinical written report would not be to say that someone is a psychopath as if it's an all or nothing, 100% or 0% thing, but instead to talk about the degree of psychopath traits that are believed to be present: mild, moderate, or severe psychopathic traits. That is an example of how this would be written in a clinical report. The patient appears to demonstrate moderate to severe psychopathic traits. That is an example. One of the biggest misconceptions about psychopaths, I believe, comes from the media, television, and films. And that is this myth that psychopaths are always serial killers. Now, that is not true. In fact, many psychopaths will not be violent. There are certainly greater violent episodes among psychopaths than non psychopaths, but it's really important to understand that simply psychopath behavior doesn't mean that the individual will be violent. Similarly, all psychopaths will not always commit murder. What's important to note is that not all serial killers are even believed to be psychopaths. One might think that if someone were a serial killer, that would mean that they must necessarily be a psychopath. But I'll talk in a little bit about how one diagnoses for psychopath traits, and that will become clear why a person may be a serial killer, but not necessarily a psychopath. Now, how does one test to determine if a person presents psychopathic traits? One of the best tests there is was developed by Robert Hare, and it is called the Psychopathy Checklist Revised. This is a test that I've been trained in, and it basically includes many different areas to assess in to determine whether the individual presents any of these traits or behaviors. And it is believed by many that a score of about 30 or higher is indicative of severe psychopathic traits. What are the traits and behaviors of someone who is psychopathic? I will share some of the traits that are included on the Psychopathy Checklist Revised that help to determine if a person is psychopathic. And some of these traits include glib and superficial. So the person talks about things, acts, behaves in a way that suggests as if nothing is really important, nothing really matters, feelings aren't important. They can be glib and superficial, egocentric and grandiose. So not only are they overly focused on themselves, but they can also have a grandiose or inflated sense of themselves and their beliefs, their powers, their strengths, their abilities. Grandiose, inflated. Lack of remorse or guilt is crucial when understanding the mind of an individual who is psychopathic. Lack of remorse or guilt. So, engaging in behaviors that may cause harm or hurt, but simply not having a second thought about it. Another trait is deceitful and manipulative. And when we talk about deceitful and manipulative, it's important to think about the word con or conning. So, individuals who are psychopathic will often engage in conning behavior. They will exploit individuals for financial gain, for sexual gain. Another trait is the lack of empathy, simply not having feelings about the feelings that others have, really putting themselves in the shoes of another person and imagining what they may feel like. Another trait that can be found in someone who is psychopathic is the need for excitement. A lot of times there is this belief that there is this underlying sort of chronic sense of boredom that the individual who is psychopathic has. And so sometimes they may engage in behaviors to actually stimulate themselves. They need this excitement. There is some research that suggests that psychopaths have lower subcortical arousal. So, actually, that they may engage in behaviors to arouse themselves, their central nervous system, so that they can defend against the boredom that they feel underneath. Another trait is that the psychopathic individual can be impulsive. But here's what I want to say about that. It's really important, though, to understand that just because an individual who is psychopathic can be impulsive doesn't mean that on the other side, they can't also be calculating and plan things well. One of the things, for example, is that if an individual does set their mind on something they want, they can be very goal directed and very methodical about how they approach something. So, an individual who is psychopathic can be both impulsive in some ways, but also calculating in other ways. And the last one that I'll comment on here in this video is early behavior problems. There's also a lot of research to suggest that early behavior problems is something that exists in the histories of individuals who later are identified as psychopathic. These are some of the traits and behaviors that may be found in an individual who presents psychopathy. Now, next, I am going to talk about where you may find psychopathic individuals. So, where do they exist? Are all of them in prison? Not necessarily. There is a higher percentage of psychopathic individuals who are incarcerated, but it's important to understand that those are the individuals who have been caught for their offenses. And it may be that the individuals who are psychopathic and incarcerated are more moderate to severely impacted psychopaths, as opposed to those who present maybe a few or mild psychopathic traits and haven't been caught. So it may be that more mild or even moderate psychopathic individuals exist out in the community in all different areas of life. And one of the things that I would suggest is that individuals who are psychopathic really value money, power, and prestige. And so a lot of times they will be drawn to areas in life, to arenas, so to speak, where there is money, power, and prestige. Many psychopathic individuals can also be found in the workplace. And in fact, Hare and Babiak wrote a book called Snakes in Suits, and they talk about this phenomenon that a lot of times psychopathic individuals will exist in the workplace and may often also be in areas of work where there is a lot of money, where there is a lot of power, where there is a lot of prestige. So, for example, you may find higher percentages of psychopaths on Wall Street, stock exchanges, any place where there is a lot of money, power, and prestige, and there are those things to exploit, psychopaths will be more drawn. Another important area for us to talk about today is to talk about the issue of how one becomes a psychopath. Some people may say that psychopaths are born and that sociopaths are made. So I'll talk for a moment about the difference between those two different definitions. First of all, the term sociopath is not a clinical term. Sociopath does refer to a disorder, antisocial personality disorder, that is in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, while psychopathy is not in that manual. Some argue that psychopathy is not in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders because it is a little bit more subjective to assess. That some of the areas that I went over before, like glib and superficial, for example, are a little bit more difficult to measure, while the diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder is more behavior based, and as a result it can render a more accurate diagnosis. So Are psychopaths born? Is it genetic? The research suggests that there is a significant genetic component, but it's really important to understand that that doesn't mean that it is 100% genetic, that it doesn't mean that genetics cause psychopathy. It means that genetics can play a significant role in psychopathy. Research has shown that genes account for about 50% of the variance in psychopathic traits. So, again, there does appear to be a genetic component. Another issue that I want to address briefly is the issue of caring and the psychopath. So, the question is, can a psychopath care about anyone? When we talk about some of the traits of the psychopathic individual, we talk about someone that doesn't have remorse, that doesn't have guilt, that doesn't feel a lot of the things that we expect individuals to feel. At the same time, I believe it's important to understand that it doesn't mean that the psychopath is not capable of caring about anyone at all. So it is not necessarily that the psychopath feels zero feelings for anyone ever, and also that the psychopathic individual would exploit anyone and harm every single individual to the same exact degree. What's most important to understand is that a psychopathic individual will not have the same emotional depth of emotions in relationships that others will have. They will not have the same depth of emotion. They will not have the same range of emotions, and they won't show the same capacity for intense emotions of caring and love and taking responsibility for their part in relationships. That will be very, very, very different. But there may be an individual or two in the life of an individual who is psychopathic that they may spare to some extent from exploitation that they might engage in with everyone else. They may not exploit some people to the same degree that they would others. Another important point that I want to cover is the motivation of the psychopath. What really motivates the psychopath? Psychopathic individuals are motivated by their egocentricity. They are motivated by power and control. These are the things that they really want. And they exert this control over others in relationships. One of the things that happens a lot of times with psychopaths is they will start researching individuals to try to develop relationships with and get in with because that individual has something that they want. They may have power that the psychopath would like to be closer to and get access to. They may have money that the psychopath would like to get access to and ultimately exploit. They will target individuals that they can con in all different ways. This is par for the course for someone who is psychopathic, this search for power and control over others. And they will do it in different ways. They will also do it romantically. They may start sexual or romantic relationships because that individual has something that they want, and they will con that individual and oftentimes then leave them and discard them as soon as they have gotten what they need. So, in this way, the depth of attachment, it is not like other individuals. It is simply not that kind of close, deep, connected caring and attachment. At the same time, when a person meets someone who is psychopathic, that psychopathic person can seem warm and caring and engaging. Psychopaths have learned to mimic a lot of the emotions and the social graces that they have seen in others across society, and they will often mimic them. They know what they need to do to get someone, to conquer someone. They may flatter individuals when they first meet them. They may ask them questions that indicate a deep curiosity and caring. And then the individual trusts them, and then they can start to get a sense of what is this person's Achilles heel? What is this person's weaknesses? What are their frailties, and where are they fragile? Where is their self esteem low in some ways? All of this can be used later as leverage against them. So, in a way, life becomes a chessboard, and the individuals in the psychopath's life become pieces on the board to exploit, to strategize around, to calculate, and to manipulate. The last point that I want to go over in this video is about whether some individuals are at greater risk of being targeted by psychopaths. So the answer is yes, there are groups of people who are at greater risk of being taken advantage of by psychopathic individuals. And those are individuals who, in some ways, are vulnerable. The individual may be vulnerable emotionally, they may be vulnerable because they are lonely, they are isolated. Individuals who are elderly can be especially targeted because individuals who are older may have lots of money or lots of money in savings. They may be lonely or isolated from family or friends, and these can make great targets for someone who wants to exploit them or abuse them financially or emotionally or psychologically in some ways. Individuals who have low self esteem and significant emotional insecurities are at greater risk of being targeted by psychopaths because psychopaths can often see those individuals clearly and then exploit them. Individuals who are psychopathic are able to read others well. They have honed in on this ability to see insecurities and vulnerabilities for many years. Overall, psychopathic individuals can be dangerous and they can cause hurts and destructions in many different ways. They can do that physically, but they can also do it emotionally and psychologically. It's very important when individuals meet people that make them insecure in this way and that they wonder, something about this person seems off or wrong, or I don't trust them. This person seems too good to be true, seems too slick and too breezy, or maybe there are parts of this person's past or their history that don't quite add up and don't quite make sense, or the things that you're being told somehow don't feel true. If you have any of these concerns or questions, it's important for you to listen to your instincts and talk to a few trusted friends or family members about those feelings to get a little feedback. But I hope that this video has been helpful in helping you understand a little bit better some of the traits and behaviors of individuals who are psychopathic. If you're interested to learn more, some of the best writers on this topic of psychopathy are Mary Ellen O'Toole, J. Reed Malloy, Paul Babiak, and Robert Hare. And in addition, I would direct your attention to a very informative and helpful article that is written by many experts in the field and published in the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin. That article is called Psychopathy, an important forensic concept of the 21st century. Again, I hope you have found this video helpful and informative. And if it has, please like this video so that I know what you find helpful. I will also post some notes with this video so that you have some resources for more information on this topic.